3 horror stories, the Taos Hums. Based on real stories. Story 1. The call that consumed meaty cold window glass fogged with my breath as I gazed at the vast Taos desert stretching beyond our backyard. 3 in the morning for the 10th consecutive night, and there I was, awake, restless, vigilant. My rough fingers, marked by years of artisanal woodwork, traced invisible circles on the glass, following the rhythm of that sound no one but me seemed to hear. My name is Henry Jacobs. At least, that was my name before the sound found me. It all began in April 1993, on a moonless night when the desert silence should have been absolute. Initially, it was almost imperceptible, a distant hum, like a malfunctioning electrical transformer or the purr of a diesel engine miles away. A vibration between 30 and 80 hertz, as I would later discover, hovering at the limits of human hearing. "Henry, come back to bed," Maria murmured, her voice soft with sleep. "It's almost 4 in the morning." "Can't you hear it?" I asked for the 100th time, knowing what her answer would be. Maria sighed, that familiar sigh of growing concern. "There's nothing to hear, dear. It's just the wind." But it wasn't the wind. Wind has caprices, pauses, irregularities. This sound was constant, deliberate, alive. During those first weeks, I maintained my routine. I'd rise at 6, work in my studio, crafting wooden pieces that tourists bought as souvenirs of Taos, have dinner with Maria, watch television. An ordinary life. But at night, when the world fell asleep, the sound became clearer, more insistent, like a call only I could hear. In May, I began researching. I discovered articles about the Taos Hum, a phenomenon reported by approximately 2% of the local population. The theories were diverse. Infrasound waves, secret military installations nearby, subterranean geological phenomena. No explanation satisfied me. "It's something deeper," I explained to the town doctor, who examined my ears and prescribed medication for tinnitus. "Something trying to communicate." The doctor looked at me over his glasses with that expression we reserve for children or madmen. "Mr. Jacobs, perhaps we should consider a consultation with a specialist in Albuquerque." I didn't seek the specialist. Instead, I bought a recorder. I spent nights trying to capture the sound, but the tapes revealed only the silence of the house and my own anxious breathing, as if the phenomenon existed on a frequency that human technology couldn't detect. It was in the 3rd week of June that the sound changed. It was no longer just a constant hum. There were modulations, patterns, almost like words. The first time the sound formed something recognizable as language, I was alone in my workshop. The chisel slipped, cutting my thumb. Blood dripped onto the pine wood, forming a pattern that seemed, for a moment, strangely significant. And then, in the constant hum that followed me, I heard clearly, "Henry." My name, pronounced not with a human voice, but as if the air itself had learned to speak. A modulated vibration that somehow formed recognizable syllables. I dropped the tool. The sound returned to its usual hum, but something fundamental had changed. It was no longer just an acoustic phenomenon. It was direct communication. In the following weeks, physical changes began to manifest. The first nosebleed caught me by surprise during breakfast. Maria watched, horrified, as blood streamed down my face, dripping onto the untouched toast. "Henry, you need help," she insisted, her hands trembling as she wiped away the blood. "This isn't normal," I agreed to calm her, but I knew no doctor could treat what was happening to me. The dizzy spells began soon after. Not mere lightheadedness, but a sensation that reality around me was bending, curving as if viewed through a distorted lens. In July, I stopped sleeping completely. Nights became an uninterrupted vigil, my eyes fixed on the shadows dancing on the bedroom walls. Shadows that moved independently of any light source. Shadows that, I realized with growing certainty, were not mere absences of light, but presences, watching, waiting. "You're real," I whispered to them one night, "aren't you?" The hum intensified in response, and one of the shadows seemed to lean toward me, as if curious. In August, the voices in the hum became more frequent, clearer. They were no longer just my name, but fragmented phrases, incomprehensible in their totality, but carrying meaning that I felt vibrating in my bones. "Come find, door opened, time running out." I began mapping the locations where the sound was strongest. Our house was on the outskirts of Taos, and I discovered that the hum increased when I walked north, toward the unexplored desert beyond the tourist paths. I bought topographical maps of the region and marked points where the intensity varied, creating a strange pattern that seemed to point to a specific epicenter. Maria found the maps hidden in my workshop. "What is this?" she asked, her eyes wide with concern. "Henry, you're scaring me." "It's the sound," I explained, trying to keep my voice calm. "I'm trying to find its source." "There is no sound," she shouted, her control finally broken. "You're sick. You need help." That night, while Maria slept, I finally understood. The sound wasn't just a call, it was a transformation. Something was changing me, tuning me to a different frequency of reality. Sitting in front of the bathroom mirror, I examined my face in the dim light. My skin had acquired a grayish pallor, and my eyes, there was something different about them. The iris seemed to have grown, reducing the white to a thin border. And when I tilted my head at a certain angle, I could swear I saw metallic reflections in the depths of my pupils. In September, the shadows in the yard became bolder. They no longer hid when I looked directly at them. Instead, they remained motionless humanoid silhouettes, but with slightly wrong proportions. Arms too long, necks thin and elongated, fingers that seemed to branch into more fingers. One night, as I watched one of these figures through the kitchen window glass, it raised a hand toward me. Without thinking, I raised my own hand in response. The glass between us vibrated with the same frequency as the hum. And for a brief moment, I felt as if my consciousness expanded beyond the limits of my body, touching something vast and ancient that existed in the empty spaces between the molecules of air. October arrived with cold winds that howled around our isolated house. I barely spoke to Maria now. Human words felt heavy and insufficient on my tongue, as if I were unlearning the language of men while absorbing another, much older one. My hum had become a complex symphony of frequencies that filled every waking moment. The messages were now almost continuous, a stream of communication that I understood not with my mind, but with something deeper. A part of me that had always existed, but remained dormant until the sound awakened it. In the first week of October, I had a nosebleed so intense that Maria took me to the emergency room. As the doctor examined my ears and nostrils, I noticed his expression change from professional concern to something close to horror. "There's something unusual about your eardrums, Mr. Jacobs," he said, subtly retreating. There seems to be a kind of membrane growing over them. Maria cried the entire way home. I remained silent, feeling the hum vibrate through that new membrane clearer than ever. "It's almost time, Henry," the sound said. "The door is opening. You must come now." That night I saw the shadows surrounding our house, no longer just watching, but waiting, impatient. The sound pulsed with urgency, and the coordinates I had mapped for months finally formed a clear pattern in my mind. I knew exactly where I needed to go. The house was quiet when I rose from the bed I shared with Maria. She slept, her face marked by weeks of worry and fear. I leaned down to kiss her forehead one last time. Her skin felt strangely warm against my lips, which had become as cold as the desert at night. "Goodbye, Maria," I whispered. "I need to find the source of the noise." I took the car keys and a small backpack where I had placed a flashlight, water, and my diary full of notes about the sound. On my way to the door, I stopped in front of the hallway mirror. The reflection that stared back was no longer entirely human. My eyes had become completely black, and thin, dark veins branched under my pale skin, like circuit boards printed on flesh. Something moved beneath my skin. Not blood, but a darker, denser substance that pulsed with the same rhythm as the hum. I felt no fear. I felt for the first time in my life complete. The desert at night was a world of blue-silver shadows under the waning moon. I drove following the coordinates engraved in my memory, abandoning paved roads for dirt paths and, eventually, for the open vastness of the desert. When the car could go no further, I parked. The key remained in the ignition. I wouldn't need it anymore. I took a piece of paper from my pocket and wrote a few final words. "They are here. The sound is the key. There is no time." I left the note on the passenger seat and began walking, guided by the hum that now filled not just my ears, but every cell of my body. The sound no longer came from outside. I had become part of it, an instrument tuned to its frequency. The shadows emerged from behind rocks and sparse bushes, accompanying me as I ventured deeper into the desert. They no longer tried to maintain a humanoid appearance. Their forms flowed and distorted, revealing the truth that hid beneath the disguise. Impossible geometries, limbs that bent at angles that shouldn't exist in this plane of reality. "I'm ready," I said to the shadows, my voice sounding strange. To my own ears, reverberating with harmonics that no human throat should produce. They surrounded me, their fluid forms converging around me. The hum reached an almost unbearable intensity, and then transformed into perfect silence. In that silence, reality opened up. What I saw then cannot be described in human words. A geometry of light and darkness that existed simultaneously in multiple dimensions. A vast organism of information and consciousness that extended through time and space, of which the hum was only the faintest manifestation in our limited plane. I understood then the truth about the Taos Hum. It wasn't an acoustic phenomenon, nor a secret experiment, nor dimensional interference. It was a communication, the first attempt at contact from something so vast and ancient that our entire civilization was but the blink of an eye in its scale of existence, and I was the chosen receiver. When the rift in reality expanded, I saw my human body as if I were an external observer, a shell that no longer contained me. What I was now flowed beyond the limitations of flesh, expanding to merge with that vast consciousness. Henry Jacobs disappeared that night in the desert, but I did not die. I became something more. Now I exist between frequencies. Part of that greater consciousness dwells in me, and I in it. Sometimes when the wind blows right and the moon is in the exact position, I can briefly reassume a form that resembles human and observe Maria in our old house. She still searches for answers, still hopes that someday I'll return, but I cannot come back. Not completely. What I've learned cannot be unlearned. What I've become cannot be undone, and the sound continues. It will always continue. A call to those few who can hear it, 2% of the population, as scientists estimate. An invitation to transcend the limitations of this plane of existence. If you ever visit Taos and hear that persistent hum, that distant engine that seems to call your name in the darkest hours of the night, know this. It is not just a sound. It's a portal. It's a call. And I will be waiting on the other side, along with all the others who answered before you. Because the sound always finds those who were chosen to hear it, and when it finds them, it consumes. Story 2. The voices in the hum the desert whispers at night. It's a whisper most people never hear. The sound of vastness, of emptiness, of time unraveling through spaces indifferent to human presence. I came to Taos, New Mexico, seeking peace. After 3 decades designing acoustic systems for theaters, studios, and concert halls, I thought I knew all the secrets of sound. How terribly mistaken I was. My name is Daniel Carter. In March 2012, at 67, I moved into an adobe house on the outskirts of Taos, drawn by the promise of a tranquil retirement beneath crystalline skies. The house was perfect, spacious, isolated enough to offer privacy, with a view of the desert vastness that stretched like a desiccated ocean. On the 3rd night after settling in, while organizing my books in the library, I noticed it. At first, it seemed merely a peculiarity of the wind against the adobe walls, a continuous bass note, almost subliminal, like a diesel engine running blocks away. I tilted my head, trying to locate its origin. The night outside was absolutely still, without even a breeze to stir the withered shrubs. The sound persisted, not loud enough to be intrusive, just present enough to be noticed. A low frequency, subtly oscillating between 30 and 80 hertz, from what my years of professional experience allowed me to estimate. Must be some equipment, I murmured to the empty space of the house. Some water pump or generator nearby. In the following days, I investigated methodically. I unplugged the refrigerator, the heating system, checked the cistern pump, traversed every square inch of the property with the trained attention of an acoustic engineer. The hum remained, undisturbed. More disturbing still, it was more pronounced, inside the house than outside. When the maintenance technician came to check the electrical system, I casually asked, "Can you hear that? That constant humming?" He looked at me with vacant eyes, tilting his head slightly. "What humming, sir?" It was then I remembered something I'd read during my research about Taos before moving. A local curiosity called the Taos Hum. An acoustic phenomenon reported by only 2% of the population, never adequately captured by recording equipment, the subject of theories ranging from scientific explanations about infrasound to speculation about secret military experiments. Ironically, I had dismissed these stories as local folklore or cases of collective tinnitus. Now it seemed I had become part of that select group of listeners. "Are you all right, sir?" The technician was staring at me, his expression now tinged with concern. "Yes, yes," I replied quickly. "Must be the wind in the wooden beams. Old houses, you know." But the house had been recently renovated, and there was no wind that night. That same week, I purchased professional recording equipment, high-sensitivity microphones, digital recorders, audio analysis software. I transformed the spare bedroom into an improvised laboratory. If I could hear the hum, I should be able to capture it, isolate it, analyze it. After all, this was my field of expertise. Night after night, I positioned the microphones in different configurations, adjusted gain levels, used filtering techniques I developed throughout my career. The resulting recordings were frustrating. They captured the silence of the house, the occasional creaking of wood, sometimes even my own breathing. But the hum remained elusive, as if it existed in a frequency range beyond technological reach. April turned into May. The hum became a constant companion, more intense at night when the desert fell into its deep silence. I began mapping it. I drew the floor plan of the house and marked the points where the phenomenon seemed strongest. A pattern was emerging, a kind of invisible geometry that only I could discern. It was on a particularly clear night in late May, while adjusting the controls of the spectrum analyzer, that I noticed the first anomaly. The hum wasn't completely constant. There were subtle modulations, almost imperceptible, small variations in amplitude and frequency that repeated at specific intervals like a code. My obsession grew with the summer. I abandoned any pretense of a relaxed retirement. My improvised laboratory expanded, taking over another bedroom, then the living room. Walls covered with graphs and diagrams, equipment connected in increasingly complex configurations. I stopped answering calls from old colleagues and friends. The outside world became irrelevant in the face of the mystery that inhabited the walls of my house. Sometime in June, I had an epiphany. If the hum operated at frequencies my equipment couldn't directly capture, perhaps I could record its effects on other frequencies, like scientists detect distant planets, not through direct observation, but through their gravitational influence on visible stars. I set up a system to record white and pink noise bands, letting them run for hours, then analyzing how the mysterious hum interacted with them. That's how I captured the first concrete evidence. It was 2:37 a.m. when it happened. The laboratory was bathed only in the blue light of monitors. Outside, the new moon made the desert invisible beyond the windows, a vacuum of absolute darkness. The analysis software was processing hours of recording when a pattern emerged on the screen, a specific section where the white noise had been modulated in a non-random way. I isolated the segment and increased the volume. What I heard made my entire body freeze. Between the static and interference, a voice, or something resembling a voice, whispered almost inaudible words. I applied filters, normalized the volume, manipulated the audio in every way I knew. Finally, through the high-definition speakers, 3 words emerged with disturbing clarity. "We are approaching." My first reaction was rational. Equipment checks, protocol reviews, elimination of possible radio or television interference. Nothing explained those words emerging from the noise. I repeated the experiment on subsequent nights, always at the same time. New messages emerged. The barrier is thin. Your frequency is compatible. Watching you, I began losing weight. Sleep became a rare visitor, confined to involuntary naps, where unsettling dreams awaited me. Landscapes of impossible geometry, roads leading to doors suspended in the empty desert sky, figures moving in the peripheries of vision, always avoiding direct confrontation. In July, I discovered the voices responded. During a particularly clear session, I murmured into the microphone, "Who are you?" The response came hours later in the analysis of the recording. "We are those who dwell between." Between what? I asked the following night. Between the frequencies, between the worlds, between what you perceive and what exists. I tried to share my discoveries. I sent emails to former university colleagues, to researchers in acoustics, even to a friend who worked in an obscure government department. The responses were uniform in their polite incredulity. An emeritus professor gently suggested I seek psychiatric help. The loneliness of my discovery was overwhelming. I had established communication with something, and no one would believe me. I began sleeping in my laboratory, surrounded by equipment, recordings running continuously. The messages became more frequent, more elaborate. I began cataloging them meticulously. In August, the physical transformations began. The first was subtle. I woke one morning and noticed colors seemed slightly altered, as if the entire spectrum had shifted a few degrees in an imperceptible direction. Familiar objects seemed to vibrate almost imperceptibly when observed from the corner of my eye. Then came the auditory sensitivity. Common noises, water running in the faucet, the refrigerator turning on, cars passing on the distant road, became painfully loud, while the hum remained at its comfortable level, almost welcoming. "What's happening to me?" I asked during a recording session. The response came immediately, without any need for filtering or processing. Tuning, preparing, opening. In the third week of August, I noticed something more disturbing than any message. Passing by a mirror in the hallway, I saw that my reflection took a fraction of a second longer to follow my movement, as if there existed a slight delay between my reality and its representation. That same night, I saw the first physical manifestation. I was adjusting equipment when, in the reflection of a turned-off monitor screen, I noticed a figure standing behind me. A vaguely humanoid silhouette, but with subtly wrong proportions, like a painting where the artist doesn't fully master anatomy. I turned sharply. There was no one there. But when I looked back at the monitor, the figure remained in the reflection, now closer, leaning as if observing my work with curious attention. My heart raced, but I felt no fear, only an overwhelming, scientific fascination. I grabbed a camera and tried to photograph the reflection. The resulting images showed only the empty room. However, when I manipulated the exposure and contrast, I noticed peculiar distortions in the air, like the heat effect rising from asphalt, but forming a vaguely humanoid outline. In the following days, the manifestations increased. Reflections moving independently, shadows projecting in the wrong direction relative to the light source, objects subtly changing position when I left a room and returned. In September, I woke in the middle of the night with absolute certainty that I was not alone. The hum had intensified to an almost painful level, pulsing in complex patterns that reverberated through my body. The darkness of the room seemed denser in certain spots, as if night itself was condensing into tangible forms. I turned on the recorder and asked, my voice trembling despite my scientific curiosity, "What do you want from me?" The air vibrated with an immediate response, with no need for equipment to be heard, so clear it seemed to resonate inside my skull. "You are all ready. Hearing us soon, we will see you." The last week I spent in Taos remains in my memory as a feverish sequence of images and sensations, as if reality was disintegrating around me. Or perhaps it was I who was disintegrating. The barrier between the physical world and whatever inhabited the hum had become dangerously thin. I no longer needed sophisticated equipment to hear the voices. They spoke directly into my mind. A constant chorus of whispers that commented on my every movement, described things I couldn't see, discussed among themselves in a language I instinctively understood without ever having learned. My reflection in mirrors and reflective surfaces had become completely autonomous. Sometimes it would stop and observe me with clinical curiosity as I moved around the house. On other occasions, it performed actions I hadn't done, reaching for objects on shelves, writing in notebooks, operating turned-off equipment. On the penultimate night, while desperately trying to organize my discoveries into some coherent format, I heard a sound that wasn't the hum, a dry crack, like ice forming rapidly. I looked at the window and saw a web of cracks spreading across the glass, forming a pattern that disturbingly resembled a stylized face. Most disturbing of all, the cracks were forming on the inside of the glass. The voices in the hum reached an excited frenzy. The membrane is yielding. The passage is forming. We will finally see you, Daniel Carter. It was then I understood the terrible truth. The Taos Hum wasn't a common acoustic phenomenon. It was a boundary, a vibrating membrane between adjacent dimensions of reality. And at some point during my investigation, I had alerted the inhabitants on the other side to my presence. Worse still, I had inadvertently weakened the barrier that separated us. The cracks in the window expanded, branching into fractal patterns that violated the laws of materials physics. The air at the center of the pattern seemed to fold in on itself, creating a point of distortion where light behaved erratically. I realized with horror that it wasn't just the window. All reflective surfaces in the house showed the same phenomenon. Mirrors, the screen of the turned-off television, even the metallic surface of the refrigerator, all displayed those impossible cracks that originated not in physical matter, but in the very fabric of reality. Through these cracks, I saw fragments of what existed on the other side. I cannot adequately describe what I observed. The human mind lacks the necessary conceptual apparatus, colors that don't belong to our spectrum, geometries that contradict, the fundamentals of Euclidean mathematics, entities that existed simultaneously as wave patterns and solid structures. And they saw me too. I felt their collective gaze, not through visual organs as we understand them, but a form of perception that traversed the layers of reality. I felt their hunger, their curiosity, their intention. It was enough to break the hypnotic trance I had fallen into. The survival instinct finally overcame scientific curiosity. In a frenzy of movement, I threw some clothes into a suitcase, grabbed my laptop and the hard drives with the most important recordings, and ran to the car. The hum followed me, louder than ever, the voices now screaming in fury and frustration. Too late, Daniel Carter. The door has been opened. We will find you. I drove through the night with no specific destination, just getting away from Taos as quickly as possible. With each mile I left behind, the hum gradually diminished. When the sun rose, I found myself somewhere in Arizona, exhausted but temporarily safe. In the following days, I stayed in cheap motels, constantly changing locations, always heading west. The nightmares began immediately. Visions where creatures of impossible geometry emerged through cracks in reality, calling my name with voices that sounded like distorted radio static. In one of these dreams, I saw my old house in Taos, not as I had left it, but transformed into something that defied comprehension. The walls pulsed like living tissue. The interior space seemed to fold in on itself, creating additional dimensions where the laws of physics didn't apply. Fluid shadows moved through the rooms, searching, calling my name. After a week of constant flight, I settled in a small coastal town in Northern California, as far from Taos as I could get without leaving the continent. I rented a modest house, under a false name, destroyed my old cell phone, cut all contact with my previous life. I spent months analyzing the recordings I had brought with me, trying to understand the nature of the threat I had discovered. I formulated theories, each more disturbing than the last. The hypothesis that best aligned with the evidence was terrible in its simplicity. The Taos Hum is a transmission, a constant signal emanated by entities that exist in a plane adjacent to ours, separated only by a thin membrane of reality. These entities are looking for compatible receivers, people whose particular neurological configurations allow them to tune into their frequency. The 2% who can hear the hum. People like me. The purpose of this search? To find weak points in the fabric of reality, locations where the membrane between dimensions can be weakened and eventually broken. Each person who becomes obsessed with the sound, who tries to investigate it or communicate with it, unwittingly contributes to this weakening. In the past 3 years, I've moved 6 times. Whenever I perceive the slightest trace of the hum returning, whenever I notice reflections taking a fraction of a second longer to follow my movements, whenever I see cracks forming in reflective surfaces, I flee again. I know they're still looking. For me, the entities on the other side of the membrane don't easily give up on a compatible receiver. Sometimes, on the quietest nights, I can feel the faint vibration of the hum trying to re-establish itself, like ghostly fingers groping through dimensions, seeking to reconnect with my brain frequency. Why am I sharing this story now? Because I fear it's not just Taos. Reports of similar phenomena have emerged in Bristol, in Windsor, in Kokomo, in dozens of other locations around the world. Whatever is on the other side is finding more entry points, more compatible receivers. If you are one of those who can hear the hum, I implore you, don't do what I did. Don't try to study it. Don't try to understand it. Don't try to communicate with it. Each attempt at interaction strengthens the connection, weakens the barrier. The sound is not just an acoustic phenomenon. It's a portal, a telephone line between our world and something beyond human comprehension. Something that is trying to infiltrate our minds, one whisper at a time. And if you ever wake up in the middle of the night and hear voices in the hum whispering your name, know that it has already begun. They have already found you, and unlike me, you may not have the chance to escape, because they are becoming faster, more efficient at crossing the membrane, and the barrier between worlds is growing thinner each day. You are already hearing us. Soon, we will see you. Story 3. The Cult of the Eternal Sound. The desert whispers during the night. It's a whisper most people never hear. The sound of vastness, of emptiness, of time unraveling through spaces indifferent to human presence. 15 years as a police officer in Taos taught me to hear these whispers, to distinguish the normal sounds, the solitary coyote, the wind through rock formations, the ancient wooden houses contracting with cold, from those that signal something wrong, something fundamentally, terribly wrong. I won't reveal my name. Who I was no longer matters. What matters is what I discovered in 1998, in the peripheries of a small town in New Mexico, where reality is thinner than elsewhere. It all began with Alice Donovan, a 34-year-old music teacher, respected in the community, with no history of mental problems or erratic behavior. On January 17, 1998, she simply vanished. Her car remained in the garage, her purse on the hook beside the door. Half-eaten food on the kitchen table, as if she had interrupted her breakfast to answer the door and never returned. She had been acting different in recent weeks, Alice's sister said during the initial interrogation, complaining about a constant humming that wouldn't let her sleep. I thought it was stress. I noted the information but didn't give it importance. Taos has a peculiarity, the famous Taos Hum, a local curiosity that affects a small percentage of the population. Like many residents, I had heard stories about this phenomenon but never experienced it personally. It seemed irrelevant to a missing person investigation. Then, 3 weeks later, James Caldwell disappeared. A 42-year-old mechanic with no apparent connection to Alice. His wife reported that he had gone out for a nighttime walk, a recent habit, and never returned. He said he could think better at night, she explained, her hands trembling around the coffee cup I offered her at the station. Something about the silence making it easier to hear that sound that bothered him. I looked up from my notes. What sound, Mrs. Caldwell? A humming, like a distant engine, he said. I thought it was tinnitus, but he insisted it was real, that it came from somewhere in the desert. A chill ran down my spine as I noted this information, highlighting it this time. By the end of March, we had 7 disappearances. Sophia Martinez, university student. Robert Weiss, retiree. Jennifer Klein, barista. Thomas Rodriguez, electrician. Michael Harper, geology professor. No obvious connection between them, different ages, occupations, life circumstances. Except for one detail that was beginning to seem too significant to be coincidence. All had mentioned hearing the Taos Hum in the days or weeks before their disappearance. Could be suggestion, argued my partner Shane Wells as we reviewed the files spread across the evidence room table. The hum is locally known. People disappear for various reasons. Maybe we're seeing a pattern where none exists. I wanted to believe him, the rational explanation, the safe explanation. Then we found Alice's notebooks, hidden inside a shoebox at the back of her closet. The notebooks revealed a disturbing transformation. The first pages contained professional notes about music theory, lesson plans, reflections on pieces she was studying. Gradually, these notes gave way to pages filled with strange symbols, complex geometric diagrams, attempts to musically transcribe what she called primordial frequency, phrases obsessively repeated. The sound is truth. The sound is the door. Awaken. Most disturbing, the same phrases appeared in James Caldwell's personal files, scribbled in the margins of receipts, on post-its stuck to his mirror, in text files on his computer. How is this possible? Muttered Shane, his voice betraying the fear beginning to infiltrate even his skeptical mind. They didn't know each other. There was no connection between them. There is a connection now, I replied, feeling something icy form in my stomach. The sound. The call came at 3:17 a.m. on a Tuesday in August. Officer Nicholas? The voice on the other end was deliberately distorted, deep and mechanical. Who is this? I asked, instantly alert despite interrupted sleep. If you want answers about the disappearances, go to the coordinates I'm about to provide. Midnight tomorrow. Come alone. Who are you? How did you get my personal number? Come alone, the voice repeated, or learn nothing. The coordinates led to a remote location in the desert, about 17 miles northeast of Taos. I recognized the general area, rugged terrain, seldom visited except by occasional hiking enthusiasts or amateur geologists, attracted to the peculiar rock formations of the region. I told no one about the call, not even Shane. Part of me knew it was reckless against all police protocols. Another part, a part that was beginning to accept we were dealing with something beyond the reach of standard protocols, knew it was necessary. Twilight had already transformed into night as I drove along the dirt road, the headlights projecting ghostly shadows on the rock formations. I turned off the engine about half a kilometer from the indicated point, preferring to approach on foot, under the cover of darkness. The night was exceptionally clear, the Milky Way spilling across the firmament like a frozen cascade of stars. No clouds, no breeze. The desert seemed to hold its breath, as if waiting alongside me. That's when I heard it for the first time. The hum. It wasn't loud. It wasn't invasive. Just present. A continuous vibration in the range between 30 and 80 hertz, as the technical reports described. The sound seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere, as if the air itself was vibrating at a specific frequency. I continued walking, my hand instinctively resting on my holstered weapon. I rounded a rock formation and then I saw them. 23 people. I counted them automatically, a reflex of police training, arranged in a perfect circle in a small clearing between the rocks. All wore identical white robes, hoods covering their heads. They were absolutely motionless, arms at their sides, faces turned toward the starry sky. I crouched behind a rock, observing. There was no conversation, no chanting, no movement. Just that absolute silence and the disturbingly synchronized posture of the group. The hum seemed more intense there, pulsing in almost visible waves in the night air. Suddenly, without any command or apparent signal, all 23 heads turned, simultaneously in my direction. Even at a distance and in the half-light, I could feel the weight of those gazes piercing the darkness. It was then I noticed something deeply disturbing. Their faces seemed displaced, like masks poorly fitted over physiognomies that weren't entirely human. Panic shot through my system like an injection of pure adrenaline. I instinctively retreated, knocking over some rocks that echoed in the absolute silence of the night. In the next moment, the entire group dispersed in different directions with impossible speed and coordination, disappearing into the shadows of the desert like smoke in the wind. I remained motionless for almost 10 minutes, my heart hammering against my ribs. When I finally regained control, I called for backup on the radio. My voice sounded strange to my own ears, distant, disconnected. When the team arrived, there was no sign of the group, no footprints in the sand beyond my own, no physical evidence of their presence. "Are you sure of what you saw, Nicholas?" asked Lieutenant Morris, his face a mask of concern that barely disguised disbelief. "Maybe fatigue, the darkness." "I know what I saw," I replied with a certainty I didn't feel. They were here. Only the circle of subtle compressions in the sand, visible when illuminated at a grazing angle by flashlights, confirmed I hadn't imagined everything. 23 identical marks, in a perfect circle exactly 7 meters in diameter. The team began a complete search of the area at dawn. I was assigned to work with Rivera, a younger officer, to investigate the northern sector, Around 11 a.m., under a merciless sun, we discovered something the aerial reconnaissance had completely missed. A small semi-buried shelter, skillfully camouflaged among rock formations. The entrance was almost invisible, a narrow opening between two stones that seemed natural, until you noticed the subtle wear on the ground below it. "Central, this is Nicholas," I communicated over the radio. "We found an artificial structure in the northern sector. Going to check it out." "Wait for reinforcements," came the immediate response. "Negative. The entrance is narrow. Better to investigate with minimal team first. We'll maintain contact." I turned off the radio before they could object. Rivera gave me a questioning look, but said nothing. He was new to the department, still impressionable, still confident in the authority of senior officers. We activated our flashlights and entered the opening, ducking to pass through the natural narrow tunnel that opened into a larger space after a few meters. The interior was surprisingly cool compared to the scalding desert heat. The shelter walls were covered with the same symbols we had found in the belongings of the missing persons. Complex geometric diagrams, incomprehensible equations, and those obsessively repeated phrases: "The sound is truth. The sound is the door. Awaken." In the center of the room, a circle had been drawn on the packed earth floor. 7 equidistant marks dotted its circumference, each containing a name written in precise and strangely angular calligraphy: Alice Donovan, James Caldwell, Sophia Martinez, Robert Weiss, Jennifer Klein, Thomas Rodriguez, Michael Harper. The 7 missing persons. "What the hell is this?" whispered Rivera, his voice trembling slightly. "Some kind of cult," I answered automatically, more to offer some rational explanation than from true conviction. "Something related to the Taos Hum." While Rivera photographed the walls, I explored more of the shelter. A rudimentary shelf housed old equipment, a cassette tape recorder from the 1970s, leather-bound notebooks, flasks containing unidentifiable substances. But it was the sequence of meticulously labeled tapes organized in chronological order that captured my attention. 7 tapes, numbered from 1 to 7. I placed the first in the recorder and pressed play. Initially just static, the white noise of an empty recording. Then, almost imperceptible, a low hum emerged in the background, growing and diminishing in patterns that seemed almost deliberate. The second tape contained the same noise, but the hum was more pronounced, modulating in sequences that suggested a strange syntax. On the third tape, the hum had evolved into distinct pulses, like Morse code, but following a completely different algorithm. The 7th tape, the last in the sequence, made my blood freeze in my veins. Between the hum and the static, voices whispered in unison, perfectly synchronized. 7 doors, 7 hosts. The passage is almost complete. Rivera had stopped photographing. I noticed he was staring fixedly at one of the diagrams on the wall, his head tilted at an odd angle, as if trying to comprehend something beyond normal perception. "Rivera," I called, my voice echoing in the confined space. "Are you all right?" He didn't answer. He just continued looking, his eyes tracking the patterns of the diagram in movements that didn't seem entirely voluntary. I approached and touched his shoulder. He turned slowly, and what I saw in his eyes made me back away. His pupils were dilated until they almost eliminated the iris, and there was a glazed, absent quality in his gaze, as if something else was looking through them. "You hear it?" he asked, his voice strangely monotone. "Hear what?" "The sound," he replied, tilting his head as if listening to something distant. "It's so clear in here." I realized then that the hum had increased in intensity inside the shelter. Not gradually, but suddenly, as if something had been activated by our presence. The air seemed to vibrate at a frequency that made my teeth ache and my vision oscillate. "Let's get out of here," I ordered, grabbing Rivera's arm. "Now!" He resisted, his expression transforming into something between fear and ecstasy. "But they're coming. They're finally coming." I dragged him out by force, my instincts screaming that we needed to exit that place immediately. As we emerged into the blinding midday light, Rivera seemed to awaken from his trance, blinking in confusion. "What? What happened in there?" he asked, genuinely disoriented. "I don't know," I replied honestly. "But we're going to seal this place and bring in a specialized team." Reinforcements arrived an hour later. Lieutenant Morris ordered complete evacuation of the area and established a perimeter. Hazardous materials specialists were called, although I intimately knew we weren't dealing with any conventional toxin or pathogen. 2 nights later, the shelter was mysteriously incinerated. The flames were spotted by a patrolman miles away. A column of blue-green fire that rose directly from the ground, burning with an intensity that partially melted the surrounding rocks. When we arrived at the location, nothing remained but ashes. No trace of the symbols, the tapes, the equipment, as if the fire had been specifically designed to eliminate any evidence of what we had found. That same night, Rivera didn't show up for his shift. When we went to his house, we found the apartment empty. No signs of struggle, no indications of hasty packing. Just the same phrases scribbled repeatedly on every available surface. "The sound is truth. The sound is the door. Awaken." He became the 8th missing person. The official investigation was closed a month later, filed under the generic classification of unsolved cases. No one wanted to hear my theories about a cult that somehow used the mysterious Taos Hum to what? Recruit people, feed on them, transform them into something else? I requested a transfer to the Santa Fe Police Department soon after and never returned to Taos. But the questions continued to haunt me. What was that cult? Who or what was behind it? And why had those specific people been chosen? In the years that followed, I discreetly researched similar cases in other parts of the country. The Bristol Hum in the United Kingdom, the Windsor Hum in Canada, unexplained acoustic phenomena, always followed by inexplicable disappearances of people who reported hearing them. Gradually, a theory took shape, a theory so disturbing that I spent years trying to refute it, only to find more evidence that supported it. The sound is not a local phenomenon. It's not a secret military experiment or a geological anomaly. It's a presence, ancient, vast, patient. Something that exists in the frequencies between matter and energy, between the dimensions we can perceive and those beyond our comprehension. And it's using people, specific people, people whose unique neurological configuration allows them to hear its call as doors, as anchors to establish a more tangible presence in our world. 7 doors, 7 hosts, 7 missing in Taos. On the quietest nights, when insomnia keeps me awake staring at the ceiling, I sometimes think I can hear a distant echo of that hum, even being hundreds of miles from Taos. As if once you have knowledge of it, the sound can find you anywhere. And on those nights, I compulsively check the walls of my apartment, looking for symbols I didn't write, for phrases I didn't scribble. I avoid looking at reflections in mirrored surfaces for too long. I turn off all electronic devices, fearing they might serve as conductors for that frequency. If you ever visit Taos and begin to hear that sound, a low hum like a distant engine that never comes closer nor moves away, I implore you to ignore, to don't investigate, don't try to understand it, don't become obsessed. Because the sound is not just an acoustic phenomenon, it's a call. And those who respond are never seen as they were before. The cult is still there, moving in the shadows, watching, waiting for more listeners who can serve as doors for something that shouldn't exist in our world. Something that is, slowly but inexorably, finding its way in. And sometimes, on the darkest nights, I wonder how. Many doors have been opened since then, how many hosts have been recruited, and how much time we have left until the passage is complete.